In my lifetime, I have seen self-organized communities, and what we are doing now is regenerating the capacity to self-organize. Gandhi's word for self-organization was Swaraj, the same as self-organization, where every individual in society is self-organized, every member in a community is self-organized, and self-organization moves from the lowest level to the highest level in coordination. But the same happens with all living organisms. Every cell in our body knows exactly what it's doing in an uncentered way. And they're communicating with each other all the time in non-local ways. My friend Mewan called this process quantum coherence. Quantum coherence because of the non-local impact that's taking place all the time. You're now finding out plants know how to protect themselves from pests. You don't need pesticides. You don't need GMOs. And if one insect attacks one part of the plant, not only do the plants send non-local communications to every bit of the plant to protect itself, but to all the plants around. This is the new exciting evolution of an uncentered world. An uncentered world where we can reclaim our democracy. An uncentered world where we can not just reclaim our democracy, but we can reclaim our relationship with other beings who have every right to be and every right to self-organize. I have called this re-embedding of humanity in our ecological lives, in the Earth's life, Earth democracy. So let me conclude by sharing with you the principles of Earth democracy I wrote in my book, Earth Democracy. Why did I write the book? In 1999, we had shut down the WTO in Seattle. And for those who want to know more about these details, a book has just been published yesterday and released yesterday. It's like my autobiography. It's published in Italian. It's called, basically the Italian of life is the master, life is the teacher. You know? And details of all this is available in that book. The 1999 shutting down of WTO was important because WTO had been declared as the new constitution of the world. There'd be no sovereignties, there'd be no parliaments, there'd be no governments with power. The corporations would decide. And that's what the laws they'd written. Cargill wrote the laws on agricultural trade. Monsanto wrote the laws on intellectual property and owning seed. Coke and Pepsi and Nestle wrote the laws on food and health and safety. We shut down. We said, we don't want corporations to rule the world. We definitely will not allow corporations to steal our world. Because the earth is not for sale, our world is not for sale, our lives are not for sale. And after we had shut down WTO in Seattle, journalists would keep coming to me and saying, well, we know what you're against, but tell us what you're for. I said, but we said it already in Seattle. We are for our seeds and seed freedom. We are for our food and food freedom. We are for our communities. We are for our local democracies and local economies. And I got a bit tired of giving this answer, so I said, I'll just write it down. And I wrote the book, Earth Democracy. And these are the principles that evolved in my mind at that time, and I think they're still relevant. All species, peoples, and cultures have intrinsic worth. The second, the Earth community is a democracy of all life. In the Earth's community, there is no privileged species. There is no privileged human being. There is no privileged race. Every being has its role in the web of life. Diversity and nature, in nature and culture, are the organizing principles and must be defended. And to me, a very simple principle that is very important in this point where everyone is talking about the cost of living crisis. And I watch in prosperous countries like America, millions living in tents, homeless. In the UK, people standing in long queues for food, even in Italy. And in a democracy, all beings have a natural right to sustenance, because we are earth beings. Earth beings have a right to sustenance, to food, to water, to shelter, to community. Earth democracy is based on living economies and living democracy, not economies of death and democracies that are dead. When I say democracies that are dead, I mean democracies where people elect leaders who stop listening to them. Because in representative democracy, it should be of the people, by the people, for the people. That's what it used to be. And now it is of the corporations, by the corporations, for the corporations. And worse, during COVID, we saw a few billionaires, particularly one billionaire about whom I've written in Oneness versus 1%, and from Netanya we have produced a book called Gates to a Global Empire. How every sector is being taken over by Mr. Bill Gates, from education to media to health. And that's centering of power in one individual who does not understand the life of the earth and life of people, and has only one measure, making money. That cannot be the basis of a living, of an earth democracy. A democracy is a living democracy where every being participates, and where, and it's not, it's not that the river doesn't sing, it's not that the birds don't sing, and Rachel Carson wrote her book, The Silent Spring. Millions of birds have gone in Europe. Silent Spring was written in the 70s. We know why birds are dying. We know why insects are dying. And in a living democracy of the earth, our duty is to not just listen to the earth, but to take care of those beings that cannot go to court, that are not able to use the institutions of greed for defending their interests. We have to stand with them, including members of the human community who are being treated as throwaway people. In a democracy, there is no disposable person, because there is no center. Everyone is the center and everyone is relevant. Earth democracy is based on living cultures. When I was writing this book and these principles, Samuel Huntington, just before this, it was really to justify the Iraq War. He wrote a book called The Clash of Civilizations. And in that he said, you can only know who you are if you know who you hate. And what this has done is created three things. Of course, given rise to the substitution of life, living, livelihoods with identity politics and the clash of identities of every kind at every level. But to say I can only know who I am when I know who I hate, that person has no idea that you know who you are because of who you love, whom you're related to, and that means the earth, your community, all of humanity. Living cultures are life nourishing. This culture of hate, which has gone hand in hand with globalization, is a culture that is leading to killing and death everywhere. When I see the reports from US talking about gun violence in schools, then all you can think of is these cultures are no more about life, protection, freedom. And Earth democracy globalizes peace, care, and compassion. And these are the flows and the bonds that connect all of the Earth beings. We have to learn once again how to care. We have to learn once again how to love. We have to learn once again how to be compassionate. But these are potentials in us. They have not disappeared. And we can nourish those potentials to create a world that's livable for all. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I have a simple question, not that simple, but anyway, as we live in a world which is dominated by the media, it's a media-dominated world in which, unfortunately, we rarely hear the kind of discourse that you have proposed since at least 20 or 30 years ago. So how can we change that? How can we hear more this kind of discourse instead, even in politics? How can we change the paradigm, the current paradigm? I mean, even if we try to, we still haven't managed to change the mechanicist discourse you referred about. Thank you.
But two things. First, the theme of this festival is uncentered. And if the dominant media as the center has been totally hijacked, you uncenter your communications. And there's so much happening outside the dominant media.